Hey everybody, Adam Steele from Hot Pole Studios here. Recently, we did a video where we talked about using these 500 series modules to get that big console sound on a relatively small budget. And they were from a company called HRK. And I paid for those, I bought those, I did the video, and I sent it to the company to be like, hey, what do you think? And they thought it was great, and they've sent me a new product to do a demo of. So this product is something that was intending to emulate and replace in hardware the sound of tape. Now, can it do that? Let's find out. So as I said, HRK have sent this over. They've sent a few other things too, which we'll do a video about at a later stage. But for today, we've got these units. These are the ST552 units. Now, these don't actually have physical tape in them, of course. These are to emulate what a tape machine does. Because a lot of the time now, there are still people who use tape to record audio on, but mostly they're doing it for the sound. There is a certain thing that goes on in the low end, there is a certain saturation, there's a certain kind of glue that happens that's very hard to define. And so a couple of companies have made products that don't actually use iron oxide tape that hope to do a very similar thing. One of those is Rupert Neve. The company has their Portico tape emulating 500 series racks, and the other one is HRK. These are not direct copies of each other. They do very different things in very different ways, I am assured, by the guys at HRK. And this is a very clever little unit. I have two of them. I'm running them in stereo so I can use them on the mix bus, master bus, but also I can route them from a preamp straight in whilst tracking. They're actually set up in two parts. There is the tape emulation, then there's a thing they have called the analog fabric. And the analog fabric is very interesting. The tape has a drive control which affects the volume level, but they also have a switch for 30 inches per second and 15, which of course, seeing as though there's no actual tape in there, doesn't change the speed of anything. But slower tape machines, or at least tape machines running slower, will usually have more of a bass bump, less of a clear top end, so it's more of a, the way we look at it now is it's more of a sonic glue, whereas traditionally you would have wanted your tape machine to run as fast as possible so you didn't lose all the high end. But of course that comes at a cost. If you run a tape machine at twice the speed, that means you use up the tape twice as quickly, which of course means that then the tape costs you twice as much. No such problem here. So this can be used, like I said, in tracking, it can be used on a master bus, it can be used on any source that you like, and both of the fabric and the tape on the unit itself have wet-dry controls, so you can either use them completely in but not driven very hard, or you can drive them really hard for some sort of distortion, but you don't get amp-like distortion from a tape. It definitely kind of fuzzes up and becomes kind of, what's the word, thick. Or you can use that to your advantage using the wet-dry knob so that you have a certain percentage of that blended in with the original signal. Now, I'm going to spin around and we're going to try a nice gentle acoustic guitar and then a full mix so you can see what's nice and gentle and a big thing. There are so many more sources I could try it on, but I'm just going to keep it simple with one that is quiet, soft, so we can show what happens there, and one that is everything, so you can hear how it does on Killing It. Alright, I'm at the console and it's time to check out the ST552 tape hardware emulations from HRK. And we have two in the rack. These are the ones that have got the green lights glowing. Actually, not that one. Just those two green lights on the ones that are on the furthest right. There's a gap in between them, not because they like generate heat or anything, but because as I was patching things in, I found that I had one channel that was a much higher level than another. Turns out that was just a connection issue and nothing to do with that, but it's there now. So pay that no mind, that is not relevant. They can be right next to each other. Absolutely fine. So, it sounds rather nice. So, this is a little guitar piece that I filmed with Sute, and this is really quietly recorded and pumped up with quite a lot of gain. And this is it completely clean. Sounds rather nice. And I've got this plugin here called Reinsert, which is a great little thing in Reaper. A lot of DAWs now have some equivalent of this, where it will send audio out of a channel or two channels of your choosing and return the audio through your outboard gear into another two inputs of your choosing. So as it turns out, I have my Focusrite Octopre is sending the sound out at line level to the tape emulators here, and it's going into one of my RME ADI2 converters, which has the SPDIF connected to the RME readout card. So when I turn this on, and there's automatic latency adjustment, so I hit ping detect, and what happens there is that now any latency that there is, which it turns out is exactly 59 samples, I can now do things like wet-dry blend using this knob here, and it will be in time because the dry sound will be compensated for. So I can turn this off and on. Let's listen to it without and then turn this on. The tape is on at 30 inches per second sound with the drive knobs in the middle, and the red fabric is on with the wet-dry blends right down the middle again. So even on that side, we get wet-dry blend. So I don't actually need to do that here. Let's hear that. So it's a very subtle difference, especially on such a gentle source like this. One thing you might have noticed on the meters over there is that the white LEDs go up with the meters, but then when they hit the top, they cut out and start from the top and go back down. That's a very clever little feature by HRK, which means that instead of having a nice big LED meter, because you do have limited space on the 500 series, it goes up till it hits analog 0, where there's still another 20 dB of headroom, and then when you go beyond that, that's when it goes from the top downwards. It takes a little while to get used to that, but once you can read that, and it took me a few minutes because I'm used to weird and wonderful VU meters and reading non-standard systems, it makes a lot of sense actually. It's quite nice. Once it starts at the top going downwards, you know you should be hearing some sort of drive, because once you passed analog 0, that's where tape machines usually tend to start crunching up and starting to do interesting stuff. So what I'm going to do now is exactly that. I'm going to hit play, and I'm going to go over there, and I'm going to turn up the drive, and let's hear it. So that's really quite a lot now. I'm going to turn that on and off. And so that's what happens, because I mean, that acoustic guitar does have quite a bit of low end in it, but of course tape originally, a lot of the time, depending on the tape speed, will bump that low end, and it's starting to get that fuzzy, fitzy thing. Let's just see, before we go too far, if I can find a drum stem that I can just pull in here. Alright, I have some drums. What I has tracked, what I've mixed recently, this is how they sounded coming off the board. Nice fat loose kick there. Let's see what happens when we put the tape on that. So that's really crunchy, probably too crunchy, but what I can go and do now is I can try blending the wet dry on the fabric, which is the analog side, and the tape quite differently. Alright, so what I did halfway through there is I changed the tape drive to be 15 inches a second, which gave us more of that bass bump. And I changed the fabric from red, which had that really slightly distorted aggressive thing, to blue, which seems to be quite a bit cleaner. And let's compare that to Bypassed. That's a significant difference, and I really quite like that now it's blended in. I'll bet that in a mix would be something that would fill out the mix without getting too nasty. Of course, the benefit of doing that in a mix is you don't have to drive every element equally. When we process a mix itself, that can change. This is the song Sad by Banana Ranch, and I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to hit play, and I'm going to go and play around with these. Here's Without to start with.
So sad and so sad and I'm sad when you want me there, and I'm sad if you don't. I'm sad when I'm going under, I'm sad when I float. So sad and so sad and so sad and so sad and I'm sad when you want me there, and I'm sad if you don't. I'm sad when I'm going under, I'm sad when I float.
That's making that mix sound thick, nice and big and huge. I love it. Let's try Searchlight as well, which is a slightly different song, a bit more up-tempo.
Leave me
So this song's quite a bit more thin sounding. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn up the red analog fabric and make sure the bass is really bumping. So that's more subtle on that track. You know what? I'm going to go just that little bit further now, and I'm going to add in on top of the tape machine an EQ. I'm going to add in my BBC inductor EQs and see what that all together does. That's not really a part of this video. This is just me having a little fun to see how much that tape emulator plus a little bit of EQ sculpting can do. Those two preamps I've got at the top here, I'm just going to pan the camera. These two beasts are what we're going to be using on top of the tape machine. So they're nice and in focus. And they add a minimum of 7 dB gain because of the way they work. That's a huge difference. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm going to be using more analog gear in the future, but yeah, these tape emulations, I'm going to be sprinkling these in a little bit on different tracks, different files, and we'll see how much I use them in the future. It's probably going to be a lot. Back to me in the studio. Hope you found that useful. The link in the description to their website will take you to the tape emulator and all the other stuff they've got going on with the colour modules, valve-based compressors, outboard gear, all the stuff that they do that is... I mean, yes, they've sent me the gear to do this, but I'm not actually being paid to do this, and of course all opinions are my own, and I think they make some really good stuff, which is why I'm happy to do these demos. So there is more coming from me on their colour modules. I'm going to be checking out each individual one and seeing what they do, because there are tiny little compressors that they do, which you can stereo link and you can then blend them. You can do all sorts of clever things. So that's something I'm looking forward to doing very much. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stick around for all the stuff from 42 Gear Street 3 and much more content with amps, with outboard, with Reaper, of course, and much more. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Hey everyone, that might be the end of the video, but if you fancy carrying on this conversation, we have a Discord server, link is in the description. We're also on Patreon, which is something you can really help us with. We also are on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Hop Pole Studios. See you there.